So welcome to our forum today. So as we are being part of this 8th South-South Forum on Sustainable Development, and we are glad that the PP21 Forum is part of this month-long process of the South-South Forum. I think this is also the great opportunity to share with you some experiences from the speakers who are experiencing in the past 20, 30 years of the Asian and Pacific people movement. So the topic we are discussing today is on the where we are in creating sustainable and renew our civilization. So this is also part of the re-evaluation of the PP21 Declaration from Minamata to Ratchadamnern and Sakamata Declaration. So to provide you a little bit about the PP21, some of you might heard about it, some of you have been involved since the beginning in Minamata of Japan. Since some of you also didn't know much about the PP21. Actually, PP21 is the standing for People Plan for the 21st Century. It is also part of the social dynamism starting in Japan in 1989. Actually, that is during the time, that was the time during the end of the Cold War. It's also so many things happened. And the first conversion of PP1 in 1989 have been in Minamata, which is the city around the Minamata Bay of Japan, symbolizing the very brutality of industrialization at that time, together with the other few cases like the Bhopal in India and Chernobyl in Russia. Anyway, from Minamata in 1989, we moved forward to the PP21 People Plan for the 21st Century, the second chapter in Bangkok in December 1992, which have been organized just only 6 months after the military crackdown and popular uprising in May 1992. And during the PP1 in Thailand, we have adopted the Ratchadamnern Pledge, which promoting the participatory democracy at all levels, internationally, regionally, and locally. That is also the remarks. And move forward to the third chapter of PP1 event in Kathmandu, which is also part of the convergence from South Asia throughout the South Asian activities. We have been converged in Kathmandu and adopted the Sakamata Declaration as part of the ultimate outcome from the process. So through this process, we are moving forward to shaping our futures in order to make sure that the 21st century belongs to the people. So anyway, we have already with us here all the key speakers who are willing to share with you experience, the expertise in the people movement, in the social convergence, and many other matters. So if you don't mind, may I request the pioneer of this PP process, Professor MUTO Ichiyo, to provide with you some background information and some insightful experience that you have been moved forward along Minamata in 1989 up to today. So the floor is yours, MUTO.
I wrote down some of my ideas in a memo, which I think is circulated. But I'm not going to read out of it because perhaps you know that I am very, very bad at presentation in the form of reading text verbatim. So, but how many minutes do we have? 5?
You can take, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes.
10, okay. Well, Minamata Declaration, I think, was a very timely sort of thing to announce because it was in 1989 in June, Tiananmen, and in November, no, in October, the fall of Berlin Wall. The two things it wasn't very clear yet because in the Soviet Union, perestroika was going. And so there was some hope, some people who pinned hope on change on the so-called socialist countries. Yet we felt that something is changing. And we needed some new formula of change, global change, overcoming of capitalism, and establishment of a new way of people ruling themselves. In PAC, Pacific Asia Resource Center, which advocated this, we started discussion in 88. No, 98. No, 88. And for 2 years, we organized discussion throughout the country. And very, very interesting and active discussion took place. And on that basis, we prepared the core idea of this program. So we put it into the keynote presentation, which was published in my name, but it's not my own sort of work, but it's a sort of condensation of discussion that preceded. And I think looking back now, I think it was good, and it has some relevance to the present situation too, although it has its great weaknesses. So that's why I sort of quoted from the keynote in the paper I circulated. I'm not reading out, and so I'll tell you what is the core of that. The core is that now we should depart from the country by country approaches. The world changes. The Soviet Union was established, and then the Russian Revolution introduced one country capitalism, and great Chinese Revolution followed, Cuba. All those things happened one by one, and we somehow thought of that sort of addition of country changes and envisaged world change as a result of these country changes. Whether that's still held, or did we need a new formula, new approach? Of course, a simultaneous revolution, simultaneous country-based revolutions that can change the world, which was proposed by some Japanese left groups in the 70s. But we need something different because the power situation already changed at that time. The neoliberalism was already on, and globally, a sort of power center, which is very difficult to describe. And so, in a way, our great friends, Negri and Hart, described it as empire, which is not fixed with the United States of America yet, even. But a sort of a global sort of power of domination that appeared. The argument was very vague, and I had great criticism of them. But anyway, in order to change the world, we need a sort of global sort of perspective that resolved into country by country change. So what can it be? So we coined a certain notion, trans-border participatory democracy, because decisions are not necessarily made in one country. Toyota operates worldwide. GAFA now are controlling the whole population of the world, etc. So in order to change the world, we need to intervene in the decisions that is made. And so we said that we have the right, the people have the right to intervene in decisions involving them, affecting them, wherever the decision is made, whether it is inside the country or whether in the headquarters of Toyota. We have to, the people who are affected have the right, universal right to intervene. So we call it even universal right. Therefore, what we need is trans-border democracy. We need country democracy. We need family democracy. We need region democracy. That's what we said in PP21 in Thailand in 91, 92. Yet the change we really need cannot be achieved by addition, by mechanical addition of those small democracies, local democracies. These are important under the basis, yet we need the change of the global system, and we faced it. And I think we now, in the 20th of the 21st century, we really face it. We need not just country change, but the global change. If we consider the climate change, and coronavirus prevalence, then we need global solution, and that was already there in the form of in various forms already in the 80s. So I think that part of PP21 has relevance. How can it be done is the problem. Even if we need something very good, if we don't have any means to achieve it, it's no use talking about it. But so what we considered was the possibility of people of the world becoming people of the world, because there's no such thing as people of the world. We are divided. We even kill each other. Very, very difficult situation for people to come together. So we need to make an alliance. We need to change ourselves and change ourselves into the people of the world as a sovereign entity. The people of the world, which doesn't exist yet, should be brought into existence. And how? We thought of interaction, certain kind of interaction in which we change ourselves. There are interactions, but there are belligerent interactions in many cases. We are different, and so we fight together, fight with each other. We have different religions, and so we fight. We have different country interests, and so we fight. But how can we overcome this? And how can we be viable body, viable agent to confront and to first have the power to negotiate with the powers that be, power to negotiate, and then overcome. I think PP21 in Thailand had a great lesson because I think it was a very, very fruitful people-based process. Like Bamburun Kayota often says that PP21 helped greatly in creating poor peasants movement. Poor peasants movement established their power of negotiation on the road, on the highway, because on the way to Bangkok, they're met by police, and then they ask the central government people to come to negotiate, and that was done. And it developed into a national sort of scene of arena of confrontation, the Poor People's Assembly, which negotiated with the government without any institutions. There's no institution to enable the Thai people to negotiate with the government, with the authorities. But that was self-made system and self-made power relations in which negotiations took place. And so we need to sort of to have to strive to create such a negotiable, a negotiating body of the people of the world. And we can adjust our interests in order to create that. This is the kind of thing we envisaged, very utopian. And people may laugh. Scholars perhaps don't accept this kind of hypothesis. Yet, I think that was not a crazy dream, but things that is being done and being practiced in many ways. Well, I think Sagarmatha Declaration very clearly indicated where such powers are. It celebrated efforts of various people, women, indigenous people, small peasants, etc., etc. The base is their life, their living, and which is the very basis of our creation of a negotiating power and the power to overcome the present system, which nowadays we call capitalist system. In in the 80s, movement didn't talk very much about capitalism. Now, many people are talking about capitalism, and Marx is called back. This is a very new thing and very interesting thing. And so this is time to sort of go to the fundamental. We need to be fundamentalist. And the civilization, as is clear, is at risk. It's very, it may be very difficult for humankind with this civilization to survive. And so there's great pressure. And that pressure, to that pressure, we need to build ourselves up as a sort of countervailing power, as a sort of uh, power which can really handle this kind of very, very big change. I think that's why we need to talk about 21st century as a whole. We're already in the 20th years, but 80% of it still remains. And so I think this tradition of PP21 is still relevant. Thank you very much.
So you don't want us to call you professor because you sensei as a
No,
teacher.
no, not sensei. MUTO.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for your insightful experience and how things have been moving on. And I think this is also very much inspiring because the Minamata have been also the very important process to bear so many fruits later on. You know, not just only the uh, Ratchadamnon Declaration or Sakamata Declaration. You mentioned about Bamrung Kayota, one of the farmer leader here. Actually, during the P1 in Minamata, he was reside at the one of the city in Japan, you know,
Yes.
Yakamata.
Rural school, yes.
That is also the place that he's have been also learning from the Japanese farmer and how to move on. And I think this is also what is happening when he came back and then also reading the process related to the peasants movement together with the people who have been affected by the so-called development aggression. So the Assembly of the Poor or Forum of the Poor have been started in 1995, partly because of the inspiration from PP1 process. Okay, anyway, thanks for your insightful experience. May I invite the other senior friends? I'm not sure whether she's already here, but I didn't see the name. Kamla BHASIN, is she in now? Um, I didn't see her name here. Anyway, if you don't mind, may I move to the other speakers? Nimalka Fernando from the International Movement Against All Form of Racial Discrimination. The headquarters is in Japan. At the moment, she is also being the co-chair based in Sri Lanka, Colombo. So Nimalka, the floor is yours.
Can you see me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes.
Can you see me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's 10 minutes, Boonthan. 10 minutes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think MUTO San explained to us the processes that we ourselves at some point of time, taking into consideration what was happening in the era that we were all as activists grappling within our own countries. But I think from Minamata to Sagarmatha, there was a momentum that kept us going. And as he very correctly pointed out, it was the basic understanding that while we are struggling in our own countries, that Asian and international processes are impacting on our local situations and local struggles. And I think coming from this background, the analysis that we used at that time was the link to the internationalism. And an internationalism that would bring workers, peasants, youth, movements together. During that phase, I still remember we took the emergence of Japan as a figure of development and as a leader of development in Asia. And it is within that context that we also began to look at the dynamics within Japan, especially in relation to Minamata and also the other issues that was affecting a very, we all recognized a highly developed country like Japan soon after the Second World War, and how Japanese relationships, Japanese economic giants, multinational giants like Toyota, so on and so forth, were coming into our region. So I think there was this, there was that dynamic. And then when we were coming into Sagarama, when we were coming into Thailand, and then on to Nepal, the issue of democracy for Asians, even the democracy for Japanese, we affirmed is linked to the democracies in our part of the world. So the need for democracy was both international, but the Asians looked at it from our lived experiences. And I think in the 90s, the bringing of a constitution in Thailand, bringing up of a democratic constitutional governance process in Thailand also became a process for a person like me in Sri Lanka, because, you know, we joined the Thai movements with that spirit that we saw in Ratchadaman Square and the struggles. Then we saw the same happening in Nepal. The development and democracy we started weaving together, but also the sectoral aspects came in when we came to Sagarmatha. But after that, the discussion was very much within the people SARC process. When at some point of time, these large Asian gatherings were not being convened. I think the last Asian gathering for me was like 1993, when we gathered together in Bangkok for the UN World Conference on Human Rights. And that was like after PP21, a larger gathering, of which then brought in a larger and a more focused human rights, because PP21 period, we were more on a developmental, right to development and democracy. But 1993, we saw human rights coming in with the UN World Conference. And then I saw an engagement more with our Asian platforms and our Asian alliances, more on the UN conferences. And more than the going with this, I'm just reflecting on our experiences so that we can then see how we can move forward. Then the PP21 discussion became, it was there, but then we were all in UN platforms for UN World Conference, UN Women's Conference, UN, I think there was this UN conference in Denmark. So as an activist who came from the PP21 process, I also became an activist in the human rights world, where the whole internationalism and the international discourse was poised within the UDHR and the UN system. So the development discussion within Asia, even within Sri Lanka, I would say, got very much enmeshed in the human rights language and the human rights compliances, and how countries are then negotiating within Geneva or at the UN level with regard to various treaty issues. Like we started with Sagarmatha, we have the documentation, but subsequently we were all as activists were looking at benchmarks within the larger UDHR processes, benchmarks, discussions, development discussions, more liberal, I would say. And from a left analysis, we went into the realities, the only international forum for us, and there was no Asian forum. After people SARC also was active. We had one last, we had a large gathering in Sri Lanka somewhere in 2007. Then when the SARC began to not meet regularly due to its India-Pakistan conflict, we became very much country-centered, very small, and also we should also look at the dynamics of the World Social Forum. So for for most of us, the WSF process also, the World Social Forum also brought in the memories of PP21, brought in the memories of larger UN conferences towards 2017, 1990s, 2017. But in terms of the message, so I'm looking at what was happening in terms of alliances. We had PP21 alliances, we had People's SARC alliances, then graduating into a larger World Social Forum, then alliances were built via the UN in the UN larger conferences. So the issue of alliance is something that we need to revisit and see what do we actually mean by alliances and solidarities presently as we face COVID and as we face the larger issues of a need of an internationalism, a need of an international regional networking that would keep us together in order to address what is affecting our countries. One of the major issues that is affecting all our countries in South Asia is indebtedness, the debt, which is impacting on development. We are once again back. I was in fact trying to look at my old library, which is somewhere else, in order to look at some of the readings of the Christian Conference of Asia, some poems written by probably Victor might remember, one of our famous poet from Malaysia, who spoke about concrete cities, the concrete cities. So those were the learnings for a young activist like me. There was literature for us, literature from Victor Hara from Latin America, poems, literature that was talking about this concrete city. So once again, now when I see the model of development, if you come to Sri Lanka today, you will see the large condominiums, the housing projects, even for the lower income, is now a flat, high-rise building. And then I was looking at what happened in Myanmar and what happened in Malaysia several years ago, what happened very regularly in India, big constructions collapsing. So one of the issues for me as an activist is to begin to think alliance. The words to me, I'm also grappling with when I'm putting that to the forum: alliance and alliance, development, democracy. Democracy has meant this electoral process. Now we know we need the constitution, so we were all together developing constitutions in Thailand. We were all together developing constitutions in Kathmandu. But what happened in that process? The democracy had got captured in elections, which can be manipulated. The democracies are now defined within the parameters of our constitution, not in our best hope of people's power. If we had captured, like in Nepal, if we had captured the voices of the caste-based communities, the LGBTQ communities, if we captured the voice of the third gender into our constitutions, but where is the actual power residing for people to decide and define the constitutional powers? Now that's one of the crucial issues that we are facing in Sri Lanka today. We've got the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. It was passed in Parliament, but how is it being defined in terms of our own power, people's power? When a criminal was released using presidential powers, executive powers, just 2 days ago during Poya, the president has powers to release prisoners on January 1st, Vesak Day, Full Moon Day, and another Full Moon Day on Poya. A criminal politician was released, was given presidential power. So these are some of the issues that will arise in terms of rule of law, which gets then linked to the whole UN parameters benchmarks. But for me, what is most important now is to look at the development process and the SDG, because we are linking, when you say alliances, when we are talking about networks, we are also dealing with the NGOs and the civil society. And I see benchmarks developed in terms of this 16 or 17 goals of development. So I actually was trying to see where in the name am I going to link this to Minamata or Sagarmata or our Bangkok declarations. You know, what are these lists that we are making in terms of sustainable development? Where are the international players in these sustainable development goals when we are so indebted to various countries? Now Sri Lanka is even borrowing from Bangladesh. Sri Lanka is borrowing from Bangladesh. Some money swap, I am not an economist, some swap is taking place with Bangladesh. So Bangladesh has become an economic giant for Sri Lanka. And there is India, China. So in terms of developmental right and what we had written in Sagarmata, what we have written in Minamata need to be reflected within the framework of these contemporary challenges. And I would be very interested to see that this forum look at this so-called sustainable development goals. You know, the sustainable development goals seems to be what is cutting across UNDP, UN, funding partners, resources coming in for people's empowerment is defined within this SDG parameters. Earlier, it was Millennium Development Goal. Before that, there was some kind of a fluidity. But now, when we talk about development for a country, they have developed frameworks. Even for us, for the people who are working with people, the funders would say, are you working with SDG, Sustainable Development Goals? So the whole issue of people's power, people's movement, class, caste, ethnicity, is woven somewhere else within larger liberal frameworks. And then the whole issue becomes what are when even within Sri Lanka, when we are having these WhatsApp discussions, the issue is in COVID, does class matter? In COVID, what is people's power? And in the future development scenario, how would people begin to be participants in deciding crucial issues? They are not anymore local issues. They are so linked to international development paradigms. The Europe, I was watching Biden and Putin's discussions very closely, because those are little platforms. I would say huge platforms, but little things that I know will make some impact in relation to human rights claims or democratic struggles in Sri Lanka, because we know the pressure, how and where we can then push the pressure. So, so our negotiating with superpowers have become critical, less. Negotiating with our leaders, minimum. We cannot have any engagement with our leaders because they don't accept people's movements. Like, you know, earlier, even though our leader is somewhere else, our prime ministers and presidents, we were able to have some access. Now we can't even come to the roads because of the COVID regulations. There was a protest. I just received the police notice where the two leaders received a notice from the police to say, due to COVID and whatever, you can't have this protest in front of the prison. This was, there are other prisoners who are demanding that they also to be given presidential pardon. So theoretically, the issue is democracy, constitutions, and people are coming onto streets. People want to capture power, but the lack of movements. Movements are there in our countries, but they are all very sectorally divided. There will be movements for fishermen, movements. So there is no large democratic the democratic yearning is there, but that also gets blossomed only during an election process, electoral process. Then it falls back into sectoral struggles, which was a little bit different. You know, for me, Minamata and Sagarmata, they were like large movements, gatherings of people. So I'm actually dreaming about having such thing. I may go on dreaming, but how do we revive that? I'm thinking of even taking some sections of Sagar, reconvening our former PP21 friends, even through a webinar, to say, okay, we also developed certain documentation in Sinhala and Tamil. Shall we at least the 5 or 6 co-conveners of PP21 in Sri Lanka? Sarat Fernando is no more. Some of us are still there. To revisit the documentation and start discussions with the academics and our professionals to see how we can look at the really dismal economic situation in Sri Lanka, which of course is very true of other countries. But I still, if you put a finger, you know, people's power is there somewhere. If you look at the social media discussions, if you look at the Facebooks of our activist friends, I see the yearning. I hear the rumblings. We know we are there. The inability to meet has made us a little dealing, sort of not so much linked. But I hope that we can look at what alliance mean for us in COVID and post-COVID, and revisit some of our documents and see how we can respond to SDG, having those basic principles. I saw Minamata, Rajadaman and Sagarmata laying down certain basic principles, and I think they are still valid to me. I mean, they're like I would say, in terms of Christian, the Bible is there. On the other hand, these documents have been made based on the struggles of the people, hope for democracy and development that is empowering a development that will release the energies of our communities. Agriculture sector in Sri Lanka is in doldrums. We are talking about going back to organic farming, but there is no plan. So there are the various issues which is not linked to pandemic, but the pandemic has made it difficult for us to come together to form platforms and alliances.
Thank you so much, Nimalka, to provide us some historical background and some of your involvement. I remember in 1992 when she took part in P21 in Thailand. She had been the coordinator of the regional organization called Asia Pacific Women Forum for Law and Development, which is also one of the very key organizations to move forward. The Bangkok and Seoul Declaration that we have been adopted in March and April in 1993 and pushed forward and make a strong voice and strong noise at the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights in June 1993. So thank you, Nimalka, for providing this information. Okay, next speaker will be Professor Surichai WUN'GAEO. Hope she's already there. Ajahn Surichai, the floor is yours.
I am very happy to be a part of this meeting and this discussion. It is all the more meaningful to have a sense relating to what MUTO-san said, what Nimalka said. So what we are here not only to talk about what was done, but we are here also to make sense about it together, and to make sense about what has what have happened, as well as what are happening around us, and then how we can on top of it, how can we move ahead. So with this, I feel very honored to be to see and hear my respected friends, and so I would say only a few points, just to be a kind of discussion. The first thing is that the past events may seem to be already gone. Minamata Declaration, Ratcharamnern Declaration, Sakamata Declaration. They are documents. But what remains for us here is how we make sense of it. And we already get some sense of inspiration. Inspiration from our friendship, inspiration from some meaningfulness of the words called transborder democracy. We also made sense of something beyond our country. Certainly we care for democracy, but something beyond the country by country issue that made us feel something more important than just limit our sense making to our territory called country. So I think this is very human, the human sense making beyond a specific territory. We are very happy with this online communication now, and this online opportunity for our meeting make it's not only a privilege to talk with friends across the ocean. And with this, I just would like to strengthen the issue of inspiration in the age of maybe not so much hope, maybe a very difficult period, but we are in fact we are benefiting from certain aspects of the advancement of our age, that we can talk and we can relate back to things beyond what we know today. So Minamata Declaration has been one of the most important pillar in people's movement around this region and maybe this part of the globe. Not only so, we also see it as a relating to other expression of people's sense making to their own injustices, and going beyond it in terms of regional and cross-border solidarity. So I just would like to highlight this first part as the importance of inspiration beyond borders, beyond the national or geographical borders, but making us more able to live here now, to see this as a possibility also into the future to relate beyond the physical territories. Now, my second point, I would like to relate to something that there are several things, but I would like to highlight only a few things that I have I can relate directly now with this limited time. For Thailand, 1992 was very important year. It was on a very short time after the coup d'etat by the military in 1991 March. And that event, end of February, it was a coup d'etat, and within that 1 week there was already a big fire, chemical fire at Klong Toi slum, where there were a big storage, chemical storage at the biggest port for Thailand at that time. So the storage, chemical unknown, but they were fire and burst into the sky. And with that, it had opened up a new chapter of our awareness of disaster, industrial disaster that we, but under coup d'etat, it became very quiet, but the transport of that toxic leftover were made very under a lot of power. They were made in the quiet nights, moved into Kanchanaburi, where at that time this chemical fire that burst in Klong Toi, which is the biggest slum in Bangkok, as several of you may recall, and that became a communication channel among the people who live under coup d'etat, where in that month, you can imagine hot season for Thailand, March. So then all this relates to a new awareness, a new mobilization of people under coup d'etat, seeking for democracy to make sure that that kind of disaster should not be hidden. And for that, it became a part of a very strong movement strengthening anti-coup d'etat that came as a result in '92. So along that line, our PP21 organization, as you can see, the Ratchadamnern pledge. But so we talk not only about the electoral democracy, but the key was participatory democracy, and underline it was not very clear wording, but the direct democracy by every citizen who are affected by the democracy, by decision making by people in the power, are also a part of those movements. So I just would like to highlight this part as a part of awareness under the seizure of the state power, but people still were learning across the provinces from Bangkok to Kanchanaburi, and along this line, you also can see the issue of Assembly of the Poor, as mentioned by MUTO-san, and also many movements against the dams, dam building at Park Moon Dam. All this became a part, ecological protest movements, a dam protest movement became a part of new democratic movement. And along this line, they were not seen very clearly, but anti-coup movement became a part of toppling down the government led by that coup in 1992. So I just say this in the light of having the process of Minamata and Ratchadamnern Declaration, and also then become Sakamata. In the light of this, we can also see the new sense of agency among the indigenous peoples. For the first time in Thailand, which have stopped doing the census for the ethnic groups. So we have stopped it because after the Cold War. So it became, everyone became Thai citizen and Thais. But in fact, we do have several indigenous people. And under our PP21 process, we were able to learn a lot of things through Paul Luang Johnny Odeshao from the north, from the Karen, for example, and a few 9 or 10, at least at that time, ethnic groups were mobilized together, and we could recall that at the moment now we learn there are more of our ethnic groups being identified and consciously now getting organized these days into a new form of Indigenous Peoples Council of Thailand. So I just relate this event of Minamata to the grounded movements in Thailand, which also linked our sense making with people's awareness of new justice framing and also rights in the global arena. The Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in the UN system, certainly much empowered by the Ainu struggle and people in indigenous people in the other continents. But those were very powerful force that set the momentum of this realization of our debt and our responsibility of the UN system to be responsible to redress and also to recognize new agents of changes and citizenship in the world. The citizenship which still linked to the nation system, which need to be developed further under the new sense of planetary citizenship. So I would like to highlight this part. Now, with this, I would like to end my part, not to make it too long, but to really relate it to something that Nimalka mentioned, that now the language of the future, a language of development, need to be also seen in the light of a new possibility of creating our networking. So could SDG or the new awareness of global framework of Agenda 2030 become an answer to our a world where a lot of global imbalances, a lot of colonial impact of the ecology in continents, including in Africa. So I would say, you can see already from what I'm asking now, SDG or a global agenda has been a very meaningful framework realized through the international community, through the UN system. This has been a under Alliance of Hope language. It has become one of the major, one of the biggest achievement of this century, I would say, for the state system that were pulled together under a lot of working. People try very hard to bring the language of development into as a framework to redress injustices, to redress the global imbalances of state system and capitalism. But having said that, SDG framework is inadequate because it is fixed in the reforming the system through the state, to the language which are acceptable in the local, in the international arena, which are useful, certainly. So my point is that the Alliance of Hope, and I also would like to emphasize that there is aspiration of the SDGs are the same thing as we can relate to as Alliance of Hope. But we all know that these are not enough. The world has been under more in the defining power of capitalism. It has much less been defined under the people who are affected by capitalism. It has been more in the hands of the people who use capitalism as their own profits, etc. And the state system, you talk about SAARC, you talk about ASEAN, you talk about whatever, the regional system tend to be, regional associations tend to be instruments of capital integration, economic integration, too little to be seen, yet to be seen in a more integrated sense. So I am talking about social integration and talking about a more balanced integrating system of regionalism, which are not yet in full force. So how can we, in the sense that the global system need to be seen in the light of the stepping stone with the SDG language and all this framework. I would say that SDG language and framework and benchmarking are very instrumental, but they are not enough to be critical of the existing power systems. So my point here is that we need to go beyond, to use it, to learn about it, but to go beyond it by creating a more critical sense together, critical and creative sense together, that the power of humankind to go beyond just exploiters of the planet, to be more responsible for the planet that we are living together. Along that line, we can learn from the old teachings of religious sage. And I don't have to emphasize that, because when we pray, say in Buddhism, for example, we will talk about all living creatures. So our obligation to see the relationship that humans are not alone in this planet. The shock of COVID-19 should be an opening for the new sense of how to check, to re-examine our relationship with the earth and with the creatures, including the viruses. The viruses are developing into new COVID-19 of whatever kind. Some people will call it by calling it by humiliating language, like what a country brand name of COVID-19. But you could remember how Trump used such a language to discriminate, but to make it in a blame-making politics, the blame game politics. But and also we also see the American people suffer from such politics. So how can we see this challenge as eye-opening and as a new pedagogy for all of us, so that we learn how to empower ourselves as a humble beings who can also learn how to live with animals, creatures, but we also have a duty to talk across the borders. And for that, I would say one of the most important are not only language, but I think the more important also about learning. Right? May I end here? How the language of trans-border democracy become a more direct language of learning, and learning across borders, learning in the time of COVID-19, so that we can learn to be emancipated from the dominating power of defining power of our relationships. I say relationships defined by capitalism, everything tend to be commodified, everything tend to be counted, everything tend to be exploited. But we should be able to talk across. So my last point, I would like to highlight the new emergent sense of relationship in our region called, now there is some efforts to talk about Mekong Citizens Council. Mekong, as you know, my last word is about how we relate to the some people would call international river, how we relate to the ocean, how we relate to the commons. I talk now about some emergence feeling that the Mekong River, which is the longest river in our Pacific, in our region, which if we look from national geographies, yes, some countries have certain part of river as their own river. But if we see in the spirit of ecological civilization of the whole world, if we are sincere enough about the meaningfulness of this ecological civilization as a stage that we all need to share our responsibility, it is not adequate to see the river, international river, only demarcated by national sovereignties. Human beings cannot own the river. We need to see and accept the fact that now, because of dam building in the upper part of the rivers, you have created a lot of suffering for the lower part of countries. 60 million people who live through the lot of the fishery and also proteins. No, they live far away from the ocean, so they rely a lot on the ecological system with this. So the dam building cannot, and the energy seen through dam building cannot be the only way we talk about our common responsibility. So SDG cannot be a part of a national framing of responsibility. It must be a regional and planetary framing of our responsibility. For this, I call our neighbors of the Mekong region, including all the countries who directly or indirectly relate to it, to see that the international rivers should be an example of our new sense of democracy, basin democracy. So I mean, sovereignty should not be only linked to the national territory. How can we see river basin territory, river sovereignty? How can we see food sovereignty? How can we see sovereignty belongs to citizens and belongs to the animals who also have the rights? So along that line, I would like to highlight that the human only a part, and I think our religion warns us that we need to go back to the basics, but the basics must be more meaningful in the light of our responsibility for the future intergenerational responsibility. So I hope we can bring our younger people in the region, in the Salawin River, in the Mekong River. Salawin, Irrawaddy is a part of Mekong, you see. So our Chao Phraya is also somehow linked to all these regional rivers. So I would like to highlight all this ecological relationship as a part of our returning back to a more basic part of our life together, and so that we can have a more meaningful future. With this, I think the inspiration from Minamata Declaration, which now also come to as a Minamata Convention in the world against the contamination and also the mercury industrial waste in my area. So with this, I am grateful for the time and your attention. So look forward to some future steps that we engage together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Surichai, for your insightful experience and also many challenges that you have been raised in the past 20 minutes. Actually, in 1992, Professor Surichai was one of the co-hosts of the PP21 1992 in Thailand, as Chulalongkorn University have been the providers of the venue of that international conference. Okay, the next speakers, I think I would like to invite Sushil from Nepal. Sushil is the long-standing human rights advocate, and also being part of the movement. He's also played a very crucial role as the key organizer of the PP21 in Kathmandu in 1996. So Sushil, the floor is yours.
Hello to everybody. I hope everybody are safe in this pandemic. We all are having the same thing. I think the problem is the COVID-19. We are encountering, we are struggling our best to survive ourselves from the second phase. Now we are hearing that the third phase is coming. It has already arrived in our region, and which is much more dangerous. We have seen that, which we call it Delta. So the children, the younger people are now experiencing the new thing, which we already experienced. There was another challenge in our time, but our new generation, the youth, they are encountering with a new type of world order, new type of the attack we are being experienced. So just to recall from like MUTO to Surichai, and also from we traveled Minamata to Sagarmatha, the Japan to Nepal. We had 3 assemblies, and you cannot imagine the assemblies, the spirit of the people during that time. We encounter while we were in Minamata, we already experienced we call it the effect of the development, which we are very much talking. When, as in Minamata, we said, our place said that we are eager to see the development in 19th century. So 20th century, we welcome the model of democracy, which was imposed on us, but we are very much eager to see the development. And the fruit was Bhopal, Chernobyl, and Minamata. So we saw what model of democracy development we are adopting, who are being benefited. Why in Bhopal still people are crying? 3 generations are affected. Can you imagine? And we don't know what is happening in Chernobyl. The Minamata, it was first time that I could see the suffering from this, mercury in Minamata. I was thinking that Japan is a developed country, but look at this impact. And then we came to Thailand. That time there was another development. We're just nearing to welcome the 21st century. That's why we are discussing how would we see this 21st century. And there was a little bit hope. We see the changes in South Asia. In Nepal, we're celebrating democracy. After decades of monarchical dictatorship, we are able to introduce the multi-party democracy. So we are celebrating. Bangladesh was celebrating. Everywhere there was sign of change, Asia Pacific region. So we thought that maybe we are entering into the better world than this. The 21st century, we're just nearing the 21st century. But there was another event, the downfall of Soviet Union. So the world became unipolar. All the financial institutions, in the name of development, they're exploiting the third world countries. So again, there was new type of capitalism was emerging. And in Thailand, while we were discussing, the rulers were trying to divide the people. And in India, at that time, I remember in Bangkok, we were just crying when a Muslim masjid was, vandalized. And you see the seat of that division still in India. How the Hindu fundamentalism has, marginalized the Muslims, the builders, the creator of that country. Then we went to Kathmandu. Well, when we came to Kathmandu from Minamata, our travel, we are just to enter the 21st century. We're at the foot, doorstep of the 21st century. And we see there was the difficulty to distinguish between socialist society and the capitalist society. For me, it is very difficult now. Which country is socialist and which country is capitalist? Look at the situation of the country and the people, the suffering. And we're talking that we would discuss. Surichai talk about that. Nimalka talk about that, like the SDG, like the right to environment, the river, our common heritage, our common civilization. But who cares that? Again, my saying is that, we talk about SDG, social development goal, but look at this, the very institution which won that movement, the United Nations. For me, we're thinking that the United Nations is an old institution. It is for the people. At least it is delivering some service to the people. At least it is working to keep peace in the world. At least it is, coming with different covenant, different, agreements, which is limiting the power of the powerful. So, like, Peace Corps, peace, army, they were in the conflict area. It came with many, like refugee right, human right, women's right, disability right, everything that it was talking. But now I see the United Nations has become the weakest organization of the world. The weakest organization of the world. I repeat that. You can see that after COVID, the Director General of WHO, every day he cries, every day he says the same thing, repeating and repeating. He is, cautioning us that, well, COVID, the first phase has come, now second phase is coming, the third phase is coming. Be aware. And he is talking, he is urging the developed country who are holding the vaccines for the just full distribution. But you see what is happening. The rich countries, we started vaccinating our people. We thought we paid money to India, the Serum Institute. And they took our money and now they are saying that, unless we vaccine all the Indians, we are not able to give you. What's that? All over the world you can see. So vaccine nationalism, there was one point where the international world order or the UN system was talking about internationalism. We're talking about the international cooperation, but it has become weak. While you talk about SDG, but who has that ownership of the SDG? How you implement that? And SDG is not only the physical development or only not this, it talk about the social thing. It has, it's a pivot point is the democratization of the country, democratization of the world order. Unless this is democracy in the world, world order. I have seen what my point is that, the developing, the COVID has proved that even the vaccine nationalism, I would say, why the Europeans are holding all this AstraZeneca. And in the South Asia, everybody, we started with AstraZeneca, but AstraZeneca is with them and they are not supplying and they are not using. Can you imagine after a few weeks, all this AstraZeneca will be going to be expired. And we started with the elderly people. They have already have vaccine, the first dose, and they are waiting for second dose. And now it is fourth, month. And after 4 months, we'll be losing. There will be no immunity. So, it has, for the new generation, now we need to think about the world order. No, we have to think about how we strengthen the UN system. If we believe in a UN system, passing a regulation, we have seen our neighbor country, Myanmar, what's happening there? Who is behind? How this regime is sustaining, the elected regime and forcefully the government is overthrown, arrested, military takeover. But you can see the silencing. The largest democracy, so-called largest democracies, are keeping silent. Forget about other countries. We have never certified them as a democratic country. But the countries which we certified as the largest democracy or the democracy of the world, the master of the democracy of the world, I would say, US, only imposing sanction is not going to work. Sanction is not effective. Sanction always, increase the suffering of the people. It never create any problem or anything with to the rulers, because they don't care of the people. The people suffer. We have seen that how Israel bombarded the Palestinian people. After killing so many people, the children, the disabled, and the destroying the whole township, now there was, ceasefire. What does it mean? Where is the accountability? So I think accountability has become the prime thing. Look at in Sri Lanka. There is no discussion about the transitional justice. So in this situation, I think the challenge is that again we have to talk about this new world order. How to strengthen the UN system? What can we do? So as MUTO was saying, that we cannot work only holding accountable or having movement in one country is not helpful. Because of course it is, we have to continue that. But we have seen in Myanmar, what is the lesson from Myanmar? And what is the lesson from other countries too? So unless we have some sort of coordinated cross-country, awareness and struggle and movement, I think it is very difficult. And we have to raise this question of, making UN system. If it still we hope, I don't know. I am losing hope, I tell you very frankly. Where UNHCR, which was supposed to safeguard the rights of the refugee, why there are increasing number of the refugee? We have seen that how these refugees were, even the mother and children were separated in Mexico border during Trump regime. So, which country is better than, well, that's the problem. You cannot distinguish the capitalist, the dictatorial regime, and the democratic regime, and the socialist country. So we are in between India and China. So and both are producer of vaccine. But then we are, without vaccine, and we want to pay for that. We are not saying that, we need that, please give me, we're not begging. I'm just giving this example because there is, in the name of nationalism, G7, they said that, well, they will charge 15% to the corporate. Is that only the remedy? And there was talking about, that intellectual property trademark. They were saying that every country should produce the vaccine, and there should not be any intellectual property rights to waiver of the intellectual property right or the trademark. But what's happening now? Where is that discussion? Because they are trying to earn money out of this crisis, out of this, the pandemic. So this is the ugly face of capitalism we have seen. But capitalism is all over the world. There is no any alternative financial system. So we have to come up with that. We have to discuss about what type of financial system. What do we mean by democracy? What do we mean by the world order? What do we mean by the UN system? So I think this is the time that we have to put our mind in that, because, and this is the, I mean, we can only share our experience. We have seen the 19th century. We are a generation which has passed one century. We have seen the you were born in the 20th century and we are living in 21st century. Look at that. So 20th century and 21st century, is the world is going towards better situation? So, election is always now what I see, that through the elections, dictators are coming to the power. In the name of nationalism, dictators are coming to the power. Look at the Iran election. What is the message? What is the message? It's not only that, the America doesn't want him, but the message is what he did before. How many people were killed? So all this has to be, so there is no accountability, because UN system has, if it is not fair, but weakened very much. So we have to think about that, how we can develop environment, whatever, the river, of course, the common heritage. We have common river, flowing from Tibet through Nepal, it goes to India. We cannot, put barrier on that. But India is, in the name of making roads alongside our east and west. So, like a dam, they cannot build the dam. So they are building road, but blocking the water, which has flooded out the right plain. So where is the international system there? So that's why, we need to come together, bring together. There must be cross-border type of, I think, movement, or at least the interactions. We had stopped talking to the people in the name of nationalism. So there was internationalism before. When the Marxism came in this world, at least the communist people were, the leftists were talking about internationalism. But there is no internationalism nowadays, and all the nationalism and ultra-nationalism, ultra-regionalism, ultra-casteism, I would say, all are, overwhelmed. So I think this, I would say that, it's not I'm not expressing frustration, because we are an alliance of hope. Why we gather, we still see that we can change the world, because youth are with us. We still see that, if we bring people together, of course, after some time, maybe we'll become poor. Some country will become much more richer, but we'll overcome the COVID, maybe after so many deaths, of course. But we need to come together. We have to think about our generation to come. So this is the time that, we must come with some concrete proposal, MUTO, because time is running out. Today we are together. We never know what will going to happen after maybe a couple of years. How many people will be here? So this is the time that we few people should think the alternative to this, old order. What do we mean by democracy? What do we mean by the, economic development? What is development? I think this is the time that academic institutions, the people's movement should come together. I was giving a talk today with some professor in the university. And there I was saying that unless the university, unless the academic institution do not speak critically, do not speak frankly, do not come openly, it's very difficult to challenge the present world order. I think with this, I will stop because the 20-minute, I think, has already gone. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sushil. So you're right that thing is moving very fast, but our commitment is still the same. Remember that the PP21 in 1989 in Minamata, providing one of the keywords called Sanaka Sabha. It means something like the world shouldn't be like this.
Yes.
It has been developed for some years. And until the end of the 20th century, starting from 2001 onward, the World Social Forum have to provide the opportunity for the Porto Alegre international event, and using the motto called "Another World is Possible." It seems to be some continuity. Once PP21 have been seized at some certain extent, the World Social Forum have been also taken up almost the same spirit in terms of the another world is possible. Let's create some alternative world which people are justice, equality, and of course in terms of living in peace and harmony. So I think that is also one of very important matters. It seems to me that since the Minamata Declaration onward to Bangkok and Kathmandu, during the process, PP21 have created some sort of the culture of resistance at some extent. Nimalka have rightly pointed out that during the World Conference on Human Rights organized by the United Nations in 1993, the People Forum, NGO Forum is also organizing something and challenging to the so-called universality, which have been putting down by some Asian leaders during that period. In 1995, when the UN held the World Summit for Social Development, it is also the NGO Forum organizing parallel to it, similar to many other international events providing up. It also seems to me that the World Social Forum starting in 2001 is also something challenging to the Davos World Economic Forum, which is the club of the power that be. Similarly to what happened in our region, the ASEAN Summit have been also run something in parallel by the ASEAN People Forum. The ASEM Asia-Europe meeting is also have been run parallel by the Asia and Europe People Forum. It seems to be some traditional activities for the time being. But the question whether it's going to be create a stronger impact or not, that is something that we have to learn from each other. So the next speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Victor Karunan. Dr. Victor Karunan, actually in 1992, he was also one of the drafting committee member of the Rajat Manifest. His background is also involving with the rural communities. His PhD dissertation was on the rural and farmer movement in Asia. Being the Secretary General of the International Catholic Students and Intellectual Movement, he's also got a lot of experience. So at the moment, he's also the lecturer on human rights and social work at Mahidol University and Thammasat University. So Victor Karunan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Boonthan. As I was thinking about the preparation for this workshop today, I asked myself, what are the key questions we need to ask? The first question came to my mind is, where are the gaps in knowledge in terms of what is happening in the global context, and the gaps in knowledge in terms of our people's movements? The second question that came to mind is, where do we need to focus our attention in the present global context? And the third was, what are the tipping points, if I could call it? We can work on 100 things, but at the end of the day, 10 things are going to make the difference. That is what I call the tipping points. So instead of focusing on 100 things, as we often tend to do before, can we focus on 10 things that are the tipping points that can make a difference? Yeah. So that's my presentation today. So as I look back at Minamata, Bangkok, and Sagarmatha, it is very clear as we go through point by point of the demands that all of them are still relevant today to varying degrees. However, we need to refine, upgrade, adapt the commitments that we made in those declarations to the current global, regional, and local context. And in doing that, we have to keep certain things in mind. The first thing we have to keep in mind is that there's been a power shift, particularly in the last few decades. A power shift, which Achan Surichai also touched on, which has shifted the power of control and decision-making from nations to global powers and corporate interests. Today, boundaries, territories have become blurred. National elites and leaders are losing control of their national interests and the resources. And therefore, while we have our footprint on the local national context, which is very important, and I fully support that, but our head should be held high in terms of the vision for a trans-border global approach and strategy to achieve the results we want to achieve. So the first thing we have to keep in mind is after PP21, we've had a major change in the political power shift, as I call it. The second, we have to keep in mind that since the 1990s, there have been many new social movements. Social protest has evolved from the local, national level to trans-border and global issues and demands. A number of examples: Fridays for the Future, Milk Tea Alliance in our Asia-Pacific region, etc., etc. Also in Africa, Latin America. This calls for, as many people have said, new trans-border alliances and solidarity networks. And that's the way we should be thinking moving forward. Third, very important, we've not talked about this very much, but it's important, and Marx is as relevant today as he was centuries ago. Economics matters. Now, take any human rights conflict in Asia Pacific, Africa, Latin America, anywhere in the world, including the Caucasus. And I challenge you to think in that direction. The underlying cause of any human rights violation or an invasion of a territory or country or emergence of authoritarian civilian and military leaders is always based on economics and control of resources. And that is primarily land and natural resources, whether it's uranium for nuclear weapons, oil, gas, gems, or timber. Here are examples. Go back, look at history. The struggle of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang is based on the fact that in the 1950s, the Americans discovered uranium in Xinjiang, and they wanted to get that out of the control of the Russians, who then exploded the first nuclear bomb. Burma, Myanmar, West Papua, Afghanistan, Yemen, there's a long list of countries. All of those struggles are rooted in the control of natural resources. And let's not forget, the struggle of the military regime to maintain control in Myanmar or Burma is because they export more than 70% of the world's timber and more than 80% of the world's gems. So why will the military regime give up control in Myanmar to the NLD or to Aung San Suu Kyi, when they've always benefited from the exploitation of control of these natural resources? Therefore, what does that mean for us? It means we need to focus our messaging, our demands, our statements on human rights and democracy based on these economic fundamentals. We've been very strong, and I fully support that. Over the decades, we focused on civil and political rights. Today, that is not enough. Human rights organizations need to move to also balance the economic, social, cultural rights and the collective rights. And that's the foundation on which we will get our civil and political demands. And I've come to that firm conclusion after many years of research, thinking, and work with human rights colleagues, that we're not going to achieve civil political rights in Burma or anywhere else in the world today if we do not focus on the economic, social, cultural rights and the collective rights of indigenous peoples, minorities, and communities. So, economics matters. Third, the human rights of future generations. The importance of strengthening intergenerational alliances and solidarity with young people. Why? I'm following right now litigation cases on climate change that's being brought to the UN and to other bodies like the EU. And when these litigation cases come up, including by children, the legal experts tell us, and I quote, this is quotes from the lawyers, future persons cannot have rights because they do not exist and therefore cannot have anything including rights. Future human beings are indeterminate and contingent, not actual without identity. Therefore, we cannot know their numbers or their needs, desires, and tastes. Indeed, we cannot even be sure that they exist. Therefore, skeptics conclude that presently living persons cannot have legal obligations to future generations. This is being fought by prosecutors in courts of law when litigation cases have come up. And that's the reality. So what does that mean for us in relation to climate change or climate justice? That we know that children and young people's best interests are not confined to the present. They must include proper concern for their future well-being. Therefore, logically, it needs to hold today's governments, corporate institutions accountable for the ravages of climate change and human rights. So governments, corporations, institutions cannot be absorbed or over the accountability that they have to future generations. So my proposal is therefore to look at developing what I call a global people's agenda 2030 for us, whether it's part of the World Social Forum or whether it's part of any type of alliance, including PP21, it's time we focus on that. Why is this important? Why do we need a global people's agenda? Because, and I go back to statements that have been made on the SDGs. At the end of the day, global development agendas are not new. In the 70s, we had the development decades. Later, we had the Millennium Development Goals, and now we have the SDGs. I agree. The Sustainable Development Goals are a far more improved, developed agenda, more comprehensive, a little more people-centered, and sensitive to the global South. And yet, at the end of the day, and I say this having worked 16 years with the UN system, even in New York, and followed the debate on the MDGs and the SDGs. And I say this, that the SDGs is still placed within the framework of the neoliberal agenda. The assumptions, the principles, and the values promoted by the SDGs are still couched, taking the neoliberal paradigm as given, not to be questioned. So therefore, what the UN and others are trying to do is to humanize exploitation, humanize climate change, humanize trade and free trade by calling it green economy, green cities, smart cities, and so on and so forth. This, as Achan Suri said, is inadequate. We have to challenge the neoliberal bias on which the values and principles of the SDGs are based. That's why we need a global people's agenda. We have many declarations from the WSF, from PP21, and from all types of people's organizations and movements. Let's bring that together. Let's put forward a global people's agenda that is on par with the SDGs, but goes beyond the SDGs, that we can use as a template, as a benchmark to judge to what extent the SDGs are relevant today. And I have 3 points to propose for that global people's agenda. First is what I said earlier, let's focus on tipping points. We know the failure of the electoral parliamentary system. We know that we need trans-border people's democracy. We know, as Bhutan has showed us over these last decades, and very few people still listen to it, that we need to shift from GDP to GNH, to gross national happiness. We need to look at the impact on globalization, the neo-colonialism or neo-imperialism, whatever you might call it, and the impact on the global south. We need to look at all the other issues that people have mentioned. And those are the tipping points on which we will make a difference. Second element of that global people's agenda is our redesigning and reorienting our messages, our strategies, our alliances, and how we can reach the people who are still largely unreached. What the SDGs called very nicely, no one left behind. And third, strengthening, as many people have said, I fully support that, strengthening the global alliances and networks. Strategic partnerships, both the global north and the global south, but let's be linked and strengthen the linkages which has been cut off between students, young people, and the grassroots movements. And I even go further, as some experiences of work with ethnic minorities or hill tribes in Thailand, Philippines, and other countries have shown, we need to also strengthen the network of what I call organic intellectuals. Elders, leaders, activists from the grassroots people's movement, and how they could be part of the broader people's alliances and networks that we support and promote as we move forward. Thank you. Just to end with this very fascinating and my forward-looking quote from George Orwell. Thank you very much.
Maybe I could invite Seiko to say something first. And also I see that some of our Japanese friends are also in the panel. So maybe I think we can have some inputs from the panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Kenji. Tonight, I'm so glad that, that the new friends from Japan is attending, that some of them. If Sister Firo, if you are all right, I just want you to share with us about that, your experience of the PP21 you launched in Nicaragua in 1992.
That was after the Sandinista lost the election. But of course, the situation is very, very different from now, because now we see the Daniel Ortega has become a terrible dictator. And he and his wife are committing all kinds of human rights violation. But anyway, that was interesting because the center, that was sort of right after the different revolutions in different countries in Central America were coming together. So we had some people from El Salvador, we had some people Guatemala and Nicaragua, of course. And also the two parts were not so divided, because we had someone from the Violeta Chamorro's government who joined us first in Nicaragua, and then the whole group went to Japan, and there was a very interesting international symposium in United Nations University in Tokyo. But I still feel that that was a different time, really. Different time, and maybe we can learn something from that experience. Since I'm a Catholic, for PP21, there were at least 2 or 3 bishops, Catholic bishops, who joined. And from Nicaragua, this Javier Gorosiaga, a very prominent economist and a Jesuit, joined us, and one indigenous woman from Guatemala. And there was a really sort of like empathy and the owning the cause, people's cause. And of course, these were all very sort of prophetic type of bishops. They are now all went to the other side of the reality. But now I just would like to say one thing. Victor mentioned about economy. Pope Francis, last November, he organized the online international conference, inviting about 2,000 people, young people from different parts of the world. And the topic was economy of Francis. So the Pope Francis wanted to see how economy that doesn't kill, economy that doesn't exclude, economy that doesn't dehumanize, economy that doesn't plunder natural resources could be possible. So there was a very interesting sharing of a concrete sort of experience from different parts of the world. And now I think of course, some of you might know that because of this Pope Francis position, the Catholic Church is very much divided. But there are people within the Catholic Church, especially the sisters in the world, who are very much active, organizing themselves. And the one sort of advantage of the Catholic Church is local, regional, local, national, regional, and global at the level of United Nations, etc. So I think that somehow that if we are going to continue with this efforts of PP21, we could sort of invite the Catholic Church, I mean, different sort of levels of the Catholic Church. And we could see how we could really, because I think it's so very important that we have been hearing this afternoon about linkages and networking. And now we can, I mean, this virtual online conference is just one example. It's much, much easier to connect ourselves. So that's all. Thank you.
Shiratori-san, he's a member of the People's Plan Study Group, and he contributed the paper.
Thank you for giving me the time to explain my thoughts. May I share some slides? Is that possible?
Sure.
What I realized before joining PP21, I just joined about 1.5 years ago. I myself was advocating what I named the geosymbiosis, which is a vision and attitude to strive for the harmonic coexistence of all living forms on Earth. And I am in the science and engineering department, and I realized that while there are people dying around the world, we're only dealing with architecture, structures, and engineering. And I felt the separation. So this is the keyword that I set forth for myself to make it as a core for my research. And I realized that after I joined PP21 and reading all the messages and articles written by the members, there are something very identical in the ways of thinking, and that I wanted to learn more. And that is why I joined the PP21. And before joining, me and my students, and also today, there are some friends from San Carlos University graduates who joined the project with me in the Philippines. We were fighting using design, how to cope with all the social issues. And we started what is called the Geosymbiotic Workshop, and we couldn't stay silent no more. And San Carlos University is rather doing well in terms of inclusive projects and social projects. But I had my students from a private university in Osaka joining me to tackle some issues, what we call geosymbiosis inhibiting issues. But we should make something more visual, make something more memorable, and really be skillful enough to leave the memory for the young people to come together and to seek hope in alternative world. And in brief, what I wrote in the paper in the very end was these three, which is the, as I mentioned, the creation of strong and memorable symbols of hope in action. So the youth needs some kind of symbol, and not just the Netflix and all these SNS talking about fancy things, but actually the real ways of creating hope. And we also need to experiment more, meaning taking action with our advocacies so that the youth knows how to really take on what they have to do and how their studies or whatever will continue on to make a better world. And I understand that this will create a big argument, but the economy that we live in are still based on the world monetary system that is not equal to all nations and people. So I'm hoping to go all the way beyond to eventually replace the notion of economy and replace it with what PP21 signifies, which is the alliance, cross-border or trans-border alliances, and how we could create the revolutionary ways of supporting each other. And C, it goes back to A as well. However, that we also have to make visualization of our persuasion and freedom of expression. And right now we are in defeat in terms of Daily Apple. And how can we counterfeit these losses is an immediate need. And the concept where I got the idea about the maybe we don't need economy is that it is actually coming from a movie, famous movie, The Dictator from Charles Chaplin. And somewhere along the line, we lost the notion that maybe there is room for everyone and maybe the earth is rich enough to provide for everyone. And that's why we have immigrants and we have refugees who have nowhere to go. And we're always just shutting them down. And since Trump administration, this my people, my country first kind of concept got its way. And we have to also get this back, that it is not just about ourselves, but it's actually about all others. And this geosymbiotic workshop is, I just want to show quick the example that we did. We create a project designed to tackle the issues, the problems of each region that we choose for that year. And first year was with the University of San Carlos in the Philippines. And we designed the shelter and we provided in the very low-income district for their as their small hospital usage. And in 2016, in Bantayan, where super typhoon comes every 3 or 5 years and wipes out all lives, works, and housings, we did this festival connecting 4 communities, and especially children who never attended their national big festivals just because they have no ways, no transportation, no money to join. So we created a festival to give them some pride and their own music, own instrument. And what I'm trying to say is that maybe we have to take action and leave examples to the youth where they can access and see. And I know some people will hate this word, but just like the cartels, maybe we need to create a stronger and wiser and sometimes even vicious, but a peace cartel, so that all the things that have been already discussed is actually in some kind of form that the youth can access. And these are the examples of livelihood projects that we did in Bantayan. And still people talk about this experience, and some students come just hearing about it. And from there, I start to realize that actually we don't know anything about each other, and that we need more chances to get involved. And now SDGs are being talked about at schools, and I even teach about it. But at the same time, I realize that they are learning about it, but they're not doing anything about it. And students just leave after they read their textbooks. And this is a real picture of the youth, the Japanese students, and the indigenous community in Saging First Nation in Canada, Manitoba. And Canada, Manitoba is famous for its city, Winnipeg, which is a city center, but actually has its other name, which is called Murder Peg. Many indigenous women goes missing and murdered. And there's a famous case called Tina Fontaine case, which is a 14-year-old indigenous girl found in a garbage bag in the Big River in the city. We went into the community and we tried to we did a project to empower the youth, and they were having a housing crisis. So we designed housings that they could actually do it themselves. And in the process, we realized that working with these odd combination of people actually brings better stimulus and new ways of things. We start to think about other alternative ways of doing things. And this is a diagram that I used when we conduct the workshop. It's humanity, innovation, and sustainable development. And many engineering fields leave out the humanities side. They think it's a field of social science. But actually, we have to put that back into all of our education, and that we have to create innovation in with the people. So I propose collaborating with different people and actually solidifying our strength. And I also would like to propose that we have to make symbols of hope. And symbols of hope, while like everyone mentioned, PP21 has done a tremendous efforts and wonderful contribution. And while all the founding fathers and mothers are still with us, we need to create the symbol of what has happened. And declaration, all these are a symbol in its written form. But actually, I feel that for the young people, they need something that they could understand closer to their everyday lives. And to create stronger alliances, I propose again that we need to run experimental projects. And people do not know each other yet, and that there's a border of mental border. Even if we talk about trans-border, cross-border, we never did that before. So how can we think and work with people that we never seen before? And then that takes experience, and that takes experiments. And I think we all need to feel that while we're doing the project, we might be able to experience together what Janaka Shaba is actually, what it's all about. We have these moments in our projects too, what geosymbiosis is all about. We propose the project, but while we're doing it, we realize that maybe this is what it was, or maybe this is what we were targeting for. So in order to have the same experience of alternative ways of harmonic coexistence, I propose that we run projects that actually collaborate among different people of different communities. And I don't want to go run too long, so I stop here. And I have many other projects. If anyone's interested, I have this PowerPoint ready. There are projects that I went to the Agent Orange affected children's hospital, and we designed the toy. We felt that children there were used for propaganda, and they're staring at the hospital wall all day. And also to think about what the world could have been for them. They should be running around playing toys and enjoying their lives, experimenting. And that's what we try to do. And anyhow, I don't want to go too long. So thank you very much for listening.
Before the speakers respond, maybe I could also come in with a few questions so that we can have the interactions. And I would like the well, other panelists here, just come in anytime you like. I think today we've heard several times the term Janaka Shaba, which is that the world should not be like this. we should have a different world. And of course, this also, later on, the World Social Forum slogan of another world is possible also echoes this same spirit. But I feel, if we look at the opening speech of MUTO that he mentioned, which was a collective effort at that time of the preparatory committee. Then in the speech, they talked about the disasters at that time, the Minamata, Bhopal, Chernobyl, and of course, these benchmarks of our time at that time then would be followed by a whole list of other disasters. And just last night, we were discussing Fukushima. And so we could be, if we have to list all these deadly damages that humanity faces in the last 30 years since the beginning of the PP21 gathering, we find that these have not changed. They have only been extended and also intensified. But then I think the question is, at that time when we see these damages, however unbearable the situations are, well, there was the call to build an alliance of hope. And well, when MUTO talked about this, then he tried to see another world, which is an exciting world. And I quote, he said, "There can be a quantum leap, a break from what we are, what we have, what we are resigned to accept as our fate." So what I would like to point out is that it is not only the subjective conditions that are there that are exploiting and oppressing people. If we would like to see changes, so it is a question of subjectivity. It is a question of the will to build a world which is different. And so when we talk about the quantum leap, then we have to see that the hope can only lie in a refusal to resign to accepting our fate and to change what we are. So if we are asked, is this quantum leap possible? So it is no and yes. No, if we are resigned to the status quo and we accept that the elite, the ruling elite, whether they are the financial conglomerates or the dictators or the hegemonic mass media, if we see that they are too powerful to fall or too powerful to fail, then we are resigned to this status quo and we accept that they continue with their oppression. But then if, on the other hand, if we have a spirit of what we often refer to, especially in the last century, the word has been used very often because there have been revolutions all around. So if we refer to this as a revolutionary spirit, which demands a resilience and resistance by the people who are organized in communities to manage their commons and their livelihood, then this is something different. So what I'm trying to say is that if we very generally distinguish between the objective and the subjective dimensions, then when we talk about the alliance of hope, it has to be the subjective factor. So, and I think the second question I'd like to raise is that MUTO talked about peopleness. So peopleness is not just something that is objectively defined. It's not defined because then you are the powerless. The powerless does not necessarily is not necessarily defined as the people, I think, in MUTO's term. But I think MUTO, maybe you could come back, you could come in later to further elaborate your idea. I think my understanding of peopleness that MUTO talked about, or in the whole project of the People's Plan for the 21st century, the term people is not something objective or objectively given. It is subjective. It is a collective existence. And in this existence, then there is the political will to be organized, to determine things, not to accept the fate, but then to have well, to go for the change. So I think if we talk about the subjective in this sense, then we see hope, because we see that however bad and greedy, criminal and human all the hegemonic elites are in all the political, economic, social or cultural arenas, well, when they amass all these obscene wealth and power, and when they intensify all the destructions and violence, we can see that they are actually taking the entire human species and the human civilizations to leap from a cliff to the abyss. And in this leap, they themselves are also brought along. So I feel that, well, today there are mentions of the word internationalism, mention of the word democracy retrieved by the people. And so I think we can see how this spirit of the people could be revived, and this revival or this continuation will be a celebration of the people's moral courage and also their assertion of dignity. And I think, well, there are actually all the time all these very heroic efforts by the people, which may not be visible, which may also be made invisible by the mass media. But then I think what we could be trying to unravel, to unveil all these efforts so that we can see them, and then we can see them as people. The last point I want to make is that if we look at the PP21 process ever since 1989 to 1992 to 1996, the networking covered all the regions of Asia, from East Asia to Southeast Asia to South Asia. And after the Kathmandu gathering, then the idea was that we should be promoting a people's charter where the NGOs or the intellectuals would be very consciously playing a role of facilitator rather than the representative of the movements of the grassroots communities. And so there was this idea of the People's Charter, which actually didn't really move on. And so I think we have to see what happened, that we had this that big gap. And on another question, the first phase of the PP21 process ended in 2002, especially because we were saying that our efforts of convergence could merge into the World Social Forum processes, where the movements from all parts of the world would be interacting, would be meeting, would be talking to each other. So then PP21 in a way then would not need these convergences, because these convergences could then take place in Porto Alegre, in different parts of the world. And actually, there was, of course, the World Social Forum process in Asia, which was in 2004 in Mumbai, and also in 2006 in Karachi. But then the problem is, I think, while we were saying that the Asian process would merge into the World Social Forum process, there were a lot of factors that that are disadvantageous for this. For example, in Asia, when we met, it was much easier. We may go and the travel, the journeys, then it wouldn't take so long, and it wouldn't be such an expensive trip to fly all the way to Brazil. So I think there were certain strategies or strategic failures on the part of the facilitating group of PP21, when we said we would merge into the World Social Forum processes without continuing with an active and dynamic process within Asia. So, and I would like to just announce that since there would be a Mexican World Social Forum in May 2020, that is next year. So there are already mobilizations for groups to participate in that forum. But since the forum is also envisaged as a whole process, so it is not just going there in May or going online in May, but then there should be active interactions among different groups to share our concerns and to see how peopleness could be vitalized. So so we hope that the PP21 process that we are now trying to reactivate could be taking different orientations. Just now, Takeshi told us a lot about of on the ground efforts that have been conducted, taken up, and there are actually a lot of these efforts that are there, and so it would be, and so they would actually be the main substance of the People's Charter that we were thinking of 20 years ago. But at the same time, how there could be this global interactions, and within that context, further interactions within Asia, so that we can have more exchanges, and also that we could be embracing each other with courage and with hope. And I think that is something that we could be planning. And so we are in the 21st century, but we still need the plan, the people's plan, so that we can make another world possible, so that it is Janaka Sabha, that the world wouldn't be like this one. So I would like to invite our, I don't know whether Seiko would like to say something more before we go back. We invite our panelists to say something.
Yeah, before the time is set us quite short, I ask you to invite more panelists to talk, but only one thing from our Japanese participants tonight, Mr. Koizumi is there, but because of the language program, I just talk on behalf of him what they are doing. Because on the process of the PP21 after 1989, there was a several initiative came in. But the one, very unique initiative came last year. They call it PP 2020. And then they are using the webinar to calling the people. But this initiative came from the Freedom School people. That Freedom School was launched after 1989 in the different provinces, in the different big cities in Japan, like Sapporo, Fukuoka, and Tokyo was already there with the park. And then those, initiating people was that, involved in the PP21 in 89, but they were very young at the time. But since 1999, they gradually try to, linquish themselves and then try to seek that alternatives, for open the school for the ordinary workers, students, and the citizens. And then now, they make another network. And then last year they started this webinar. And then according to that, Mr. Koizumi, this year they want to start that the new, not a project, but a new, program to read the 3 declarations of the PP21 first. And then most of that young generation, they don't know anything about the past, but the declaration is already there. So that, they read carefully and then they want to link up with their present activities. And then they say that, they will do it domestically in Japan, but now they want to also link with that, this international, our, meeting in the future. So this is only that, update I want to share with you now. Thank you for this time. That's it.
And thanks also, Kinji, for pointing out that the possible collaboration or merging the movement between PP21 and the World Social Forum is also as one of the possibility. But I just want to point out that perhaps we also have to look at different political history of each of the process. So it's true that some of us and many of us have been involved in both of the process. So if they feel convenient to be part of the process, that should be okay. Understand that the next session on the 26th of July have been planning for the Asian leg of the World Social Forum and possible collaboration with the PP21 partner. I think that is also welcome for all of us who are interested to be part of this continuing effort. So now I do not know if Ajahn Surichai or Victor Karunan or MUTO have anything to add or some observation from the other speakers. Or Sushil, if you have something to point out as well. Just Ajahn Surichai.
I'm very happy to also to listen to some other friends after my presentations. And I think that there are very interesting issues to think about with the forward steps of forward agenda together. How can we move ahead while we also relate ourselves to the context where we are working or we are making our space on this planet. My point here, I just would like to bring in the past it has been very distant. Now when people talk about Zapatistas, for example, the Zapatistas, but in these recent years, particularly this year, we had more of the interactions through concrete people coming around. And I just mentioned when we talk about food and safe food and in terms of SDGs, it's something about SDG number 2 and also about sustainable consumption, SDG number 12. But in the real struggle in Latin America through the Zapatistas, and they are more linked to some scientific as well and movement as well, and where later it has been termed as agroecology. Agroecology is much related to how people, the way of farming, organic farming, and also the revitalized systems of agriculture, of small family farming, should be more valued and more strengthened. Along that line, there's a friend who came from that region in Mexico, in Thailand. He came to Thailand for half a year, despite the COVID-19. So we had half a year exchange with this colleague who is, I can tell his name now. He's Peter Rosset, by the name of Peter Rosset. And he has been a long time friend with the focus in the Global South, as well as also Via Campesina. So I mentioned this because it relates to the agrarian movement and also the family farming movement, as well as the solidarity and also the movement among the farmers in the South in particular. And there have been also a very strong move to push the agenda through the UN level. FAO has accepted agroecology as a part of strategy. Although FAO is also under a lot of corporate, because FAO do not have much funding, so they also rely on broader, which means the big funders. So anyway, I talk about this in terms of how the people or peopleness could be visible and could be felt and could be solidified in the broader platform of engagements, as well as engagement to transform the UN platform to be people oriented. And I speak now to make it oriented to the global agenda, that the planet agenda is a part of the development agenda. It cannot be a separated one. So here, I think what Nimalka and what Victor mentioned converge in the sense that we need to solidify our engagement, a critical engagement with the Agenda 2030 in a more transformative dynamic relationship. We, in a sense, that when Boonthan mentioned about human rights, became a clear pillar in the late 90s, and that became a strong case for several UN ground to make human rights as a core principle, linking all the SDGs together in the world of inequalities. So the human rights components in the UN, in the SDG are very strong, although the practice by the state governments, national governments are bureaucratic. So I would like to highlight, to point out the big gap of the knowledge gap, or maybe the learning gap. I would like to use the word learning to capture the space of engagement in the global and the planetary level, that we need to solidify our discussion. So in that sense, the rural revitalization movement in China, as well as the issue of agroecology, as well as the organic farming, and also in other ways, other forms of family farming, should be a part of our strategy, just to cite this part of example. So for this kind of strategizing orientation, I think we really need to bring our platform to the younger friends, as Shiratori-san mentioned, and I really happy to see how we engage the new generation of people, young people, in a more environmentally or experimental projects together. And so for this, maybe we need new strategies to learn from each other. But I really appreciate about the visualization and also the sense of the sense making with the new technology among the young to be a part of our new force of strengthening humanity and humanity among humanity, as well as humanity responsibility to the planet, as also exemplified by Philo-sama, Hirota Sensei, who spoke much very interestingly about economy of Francis. So I am very much interested in that, the kind of bringing back to the very basic of our lives, but bringing hope to a higher level of intellectual engagements with all, so that we can cross the border of our our familiarity. So thank you.
So thank you so much, Ajahn Surichai. So she might already left. So Victor, do you have anything to add from what you have already proposed to the forum?
No, thank you. And thanks to all the contributions and the ideas that have come up. I just have two things to add. Firstly, I like the title that you gave for the session as Politics of Hope. Because whether we like it or not, we have to engage politically in any process of social transformation. That is unavoidable, in my experience. Yeah. Some of us are probably more inclined to do that, others may not, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, it needs a political engagement. And in that context, as I reflect upon PP21 and the process, and I think go back to the days when we were sitting in the rooms in Chulalongkorn University, 1992, drafting the Bangkok Declaration. And I remember the 30-odd people who were around the table. I was part of that. The debates we had, the discussions we had, and the passion that everybody showed, but at the same time, all the tensions as well in what people presented, which finally came out in the Bangkok Declaration. As I reflect on that, I think we have to, in some ways, position ourselves. Where does PP21 position itself within the larger politics of social movements that are working on social transformation? Yeah. And in that context, I see four scenarios where we can position ourselves. The first scenario is those of us who may be inclined more, and I fully justify that. I may not agree with everything, but I fully understand why some people might choose. We need to humanize the world. We need to humanize the world by creating the green economy, smart cities, whatever, yeah? So that we work within the system, but we try to humanize it to make it more pro-people. There are some of us who might make that stand. There are others, for example, who might take the second position, which is, no, we cannot work with the system, this paradigm, so we need to create parallel paradigms. So if you look at the movement on organic agriculture, look at the movement that Seiko led over the last decades of alternative and social enterprise, cross-border with the Philippines, Japan, etc. All types of alternative social and economic arrangements that provide a parallel system within which people-centered development can take place. That's the second option. The third option is those who say we need to create alternative models that are locally based, that work against the system. So rather than working parallel with the system, we work completely alternative. Yeah. And there are a number of examples that we've seen, including the one we just heard from the Philippines and so on, about local level initiatives to strengthen solidarity, to new symbolism and options, etc. And then there's a fourth, some people who would say, we cannot work with the system. The system has to be dismantled. Yeah, which means it's the end of capitalism. And therefore, what is the alternative? What does dismantling mean and creating a global alternative? Let's go back to Marx. What did Marx say? The roots of socialism and the working class's interests lie in the crisis of capitalism. So if that's the case, then the roots of the global alternative lie in the crisis of capitalism itself. And only way we can achieve that is by dismantling the system. So those are what I call the politics of hope. Now, each one of us position ourselves where we best fit, but at the end of the day, we have to take a decision. It's a decision on our part. Where do we stay or position ourselves within these four scenarios that I laid out and so on. And I think there's going to be a mix of different things, which is good. And all of us need to build the alliance based on different positions that we take. And that's the richness of PP21. And finally, just on the SDGs, for Achan Surichai and other colleagues who would be interested. I'm working in the last year on a piece of work which might be a book or a series of articles, what I call the anthropological critique of the SDGs. We're taking the SDGs goals and targets one by one and looking at what are the human values, what are the principles, and what are the assumptions that underline these goals and targets. Unpack that from an anthropological perspective. And that work would probably help us understand better what is hidden within the global agenda of the SDGs in terms of goals and targets, and where we need to rethink those underlying values and principles, which would then help us to really develop what I would call a global people's agenda or a charter or whatever it is for our social movement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Victor. I think that is also important. Actually, I just received the zero draft of the high-level political forum of the SDG, which slightly to adopted on the 15th of July this year in New York. I was considering whether I should pass on to our friend within the PP21 circle or our friend among the human rights circle who look at the issue, because it seemed to me that, well, the word somehow is quite beautiful, but sometimes some parts are quite meaningless in the sense when comparing with the three declarations that been our key message in the past. I think that is also something. And the issue that raised by Victor in terms of the politics of hope, I understand that politics of hope is the call of the 8th South Forum on Sustainable Development, right? In general. But anyway, I think we are grateful that we were getting this opportunity by the South Forum for this matter. I think perhaps we can also look at another dimension, some sort of the division of work in terms of thinking or creating some possible activities or effort in order to come out with some comprehensive idea and sharing among us again. That might be also another possible. Understand that Victor have proposed this at the previous meeting, no? on the coping with the challenge something, but that is also another possibility that we can also make. Yeah. Well, I don't know how much time we have.
Yes.
We have 9 minutes to go. So, MUTO, do you have any key message to point out after listening to the other speaker or the panelists?
A very interesting discussion, and I think I have never experienced this kind of discussion taking place. And we talked about movement, and we talked about budget, we talked about who to invite, etc. But all procedural and not the content. But tonight, I think we discussed a little bit about content. I think this is a beginning, and not well. Well, I have to say something maybe because Kinchi mentioned it. Peopleness. I wrote a little bit in my memo, which was circulated. The peopleness we used in order to hypothesize some element which can unite the people. Is it humanity? Is it religion? What is the basis of people getting together in spite of the different settings? Well, at that time, we are greatly impressed by self-sacrifice that was being made by many people, not trained fighters, but ordinary people who, when the repression comes and the police beats people, then passers-by come in and help the beaten people. So there is some certain sort of hidden understanding of commonality and of sort of community, not community, but it's a sort of relationship that works at that level. But it is not defined by the actual status, economic status, social status that in which they're placed. Say poor religious group, I mean religious people who are all poor people, attack other religious people, kill even those other people. So it's not sort of defined economically or by other criterion, but there should be a certain quality, certain thing that binds the people together. But at that time we had in arena great Indian thinker, Hash sat there. He came to Minamata, he came to farmers gathering, etc. And he really liked PP21 and sent me a personal letter. All good, except peopleness. he didn't like it. It's essentialism, no? The extracting some abstract quality from among the people who are working together. So I almost abandoned it. But my friend Hanasaki took it up and developed it his way, which I couldn't fully agree. Well, so whatever you can call it, so from different sort of system of thought, you can define it differently. Everybody is either son and daughter of God or something. That's what. So name I don't know, but actually facts show that people sometimes risk their lives to help. So my reflection is that at that time in Minamata, stage, I was looking at movements, people who actually stand up in action. And so those people, I had the model of people. And that was very, very insufficient. And there is a route for that. And I think Minamata Declaration did better. It celebrated various people, mostly people who are trodden upon, who are poor, and who are fighting, who are fighting to live before they fight against the government. Well, that is, I think, is a better way of our understanding people as a basis for the alliance building. But I think that's not yet defined. We should think about it more. What is element that can be the basis, that can be the, how can I say, it's a sort of philosophical basis also to find the possibility of different people coming together and working together. Well, People's Charter, yes, Sagarmatha Declaration mentioned it, and how we can think of it. I think ultimately, people's autonomy, global people's autonomy should be there. And that is a dream, but still a necessary dream, I think. But how the people's autonomy regulated, what is its governance? Then People's Charter will replace international law. International law is a law amongst countries, nation states. But if autonomy of the global people is accomplished, then it's People's Charter. And I think that is a dynamic thing. And People's Charter is not a remote dream, but that is being realized in the actual struggles, in the actual realities in various ways. Like well, the labor contract may be a very primitive form of People's Charter, because there's some sort of agreement made if it is an ideal case between two parties. In the Philippines, in Luzon Island, Cordillera, when the dam project came in the 70s, the mountain tribes were there, and they were resisting that project. But they were quarreling. They were in constant sort of trouble. But when dam came, they met and made a peace treaty. And that's a treaty between different tribes, which are the independent units. That is People's Charter in the embryo. So World Social Forum says that it is an arena, it is a space. So there shouldn't be a political statement from it. Okay, Chico insists on it. I met him, but he was still saying it very, very strongly. On the other hand, the Egyptian, oh, well, I'm an old man.
Samir?
Samir have been insisted on adopting some certain program, political program. I am against both. The process for the formation of political agreement is the essence. It's the most important. How can different groups come together to work out the ideal relations among themselves as well as between them and the powers that be, and implement it. Then that is the beginning. And such relationship should be proliferated so that people at the surface may have some troubles, discuss their troubles and find interim solution. Then they sign an agreement. That is a beginning of People's Charter. And without such process being accumulated, you can't impose any good slogans on them. Of course, making such a general charter is necessary, and that is as a sort of goal. It's a sort of how can I say, a flag. It's a flag, and flag is necessary. But actually, when you really have the valid, actually working People's Charter, then there should be numerous people's processes which are woven and which should be dynamically and periodically rewritten. And that is how I envisage global people's autonomy. So I think what do we say, People's Alliance, then alliance requires some sort of agreement. And that agreement is very, very necessary. And that agreement should provide a certain way, even if the first sort of transitory way, to change the relationship toward equality, to abate repressive relations. If not in a fell swoop. So that is kind of idea I have about People's Charter, and that's it. Thank you. And I learned very much from this discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, MUTO. I'm not sure whether going to be more confused. But anyway, I think that is also very, very fruitful and meaningful discussion. At least after listening to all the speakers, I felt that we have to make sure on the three key dimensions in order to make sure that the people-to-people trans-border solidarity or alliance is possible. The first dimension is in terms of the strengthening and consolidating of the movement that we have adopted the three declarations altogether and how it could be moved on. The second dimension is on the popularizing the concept of alliance of hope in order to make sure that the broad-based participation at the grassroots level, the civil society organization at different levels are able to be part of this continuing process. The third dimension is on the sharpening our analysis and also our vision in order to move on and to cope with the current challenges which have been raised by many other speakers and in various platforms. I think to me, these three key dimensions is needed to discuss further. I don't think that we are able to find out the resolution by today. In strengthening, popularizing, and sharpening, I think that is something that need to be elaborated at some extent. But anyway, as we are going to move forward also on the People Charter, I heard from some friend that, well, whatever charter is good, except that we are not going to try to institutionalize ourselves into the new organization. So that is also the basic question we have to ask ourselves, whether we are happy that PP21 will be the platform, or we will continue to be the movement, or we will be able to providing the process, or another new organization under the so-called New World Order. So I pass this moderator role back to Kinji and Seiko if you want to giving the closing session or closing word. So, Reiko, Kinji.
Okay, I don't have really much to add, but I I think you can save the chats because there's a lot of information on, so you could do the saving and so can refer that later. And I like to show you this book that we published. Well, it is a joint effort between us and Gustavo Esteva. And so this we publish it in Spanish, English, and Chinese. So this is about the Zapatistas. And I also like to refer you back to this book that we published 20 years ago, Shaping Our Future. And so this is the book that contains all the three declarations and also some of the discussions during the Kathmandu PP21 meeting. And all these books are available on the PP21 website and also on the Global University website.